he went away.
Okay, are we ready?
I'm getting it ready, yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm Jeff Gadman, Chair of the Lacey Planning Commission. I'm going to call the Wednesday, June 25, 2025 meeting to order. First up is roll call, and I think the only members we're missing tonight are Elliot and Tanya. Everybody else is here. Spencer, would you please read the land acknowledgement?
My pleasure. We, the city of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including Nisqually Island, Nisqually Indian Tribe and Squaxin Island Tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people, not recognized today, who were absorbed or relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial, and their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of dispossession, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that have allowed our nation, state, and city to develop as they have today. We recommend that the community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854.
Thank you. All right, now I would look for an approval of the agenda. I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Awesome, thank you. And then, does anybody have any amendments to the meeting minutes? Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Awesome. All right. I don't think we have any public comment tonight. There's no members of the public present. And so do we have any reports from commission members? Okay, we're in summer. I mean, things are slow. Department report, Ryan.
The only thing I have is that, and it's because it's summer, is that we're gonna cancel the next meeting on Wednesday, July 9th. So the next time the planning commission will meet will be approximately a month on Wednesday, July 23rd. So last meeting, we went through calendars and it sounded like most of the planning commission was gonna be able to meet, make the rest of the meetings through the rest of the summer. Which was good. So if anything changes, certainly let me know, reach out. And we certainly recognize that things happen and that, you know, you have other commitments during the summer. So let me know. Looking forward, a kind of crucial date at this point, and certainly not finalized, but it's something to mark your calendars with, is on Wednesday, August 27th is our likely target, excuse me, at this point for holding the public hearing on the big comprehensive plan update. So that
Nice.
is a important meeting that we certainly wouldn't want you to miss. Things may change as far as that date goes. We wanted to make sure that that was, you know, on your windshield at this point. So that's the end of the department report.
Okay, thank you. And that is a very, very important meeting. Please make it if you can. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a culmination of a lot of hard work on all of our part. All right, and with that, I am going to close the regular meeting and open the public hearing. We are looking at the 6-year transportation improvement plan. It's going to be presented by Martin Hoppy. So with that, Martin, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, I'll be quick. This is my 30th year doing the tip.
Is this your last year?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I don't know yet. And it's only been around for 31 years.
Well, you do an amazing job and we appreciate it.
Okay, this is a state and federal requirement. It's a list of projects that we plan to start in the next 6 years. Main purpose is for tracking grants, I always consider it kind of like a check register. It only identifies projects that are regionally significant or on our mitigation list. Those are the kind of the two requirements, and they have to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. There are a few changes this year, and I noticed a mistake this morning in your packet. The first one is, on the College Street corridor phase 3, I highlighted it for a reason, but it's supposed to be 15.6 million, not 13 million. We submitted a grant for 2 grants actually this year to try to get construction funds for that. We removed the Rainier Road from Yum Highway to 66 because it was fully funded through TIB last year. And we are adding 3 new roundabouts at on one Britain Parkway and Central Boulevard, which is Callison Road on the other side. And then Britain Parkway and Western Boulevard, or Parkway, isn't it? And then one at Marvin and Stillicum. And what happened was, the 2 on Burton Parkway were kind of identified with the tribe's traffic impact analysis, that it would fail somewhere between 2027 and 2050. So they're gonna do intermediate TIAs as they build out. And when it's needed, we'll have matching funds to get a grant for those roundabouts. Marvin and Stillicum, that came out actually of a more of the comp plan than anything else. We're having the rack phase 3, it's been kind of identified there, and I think it's a really good intersection for a roundabout. And those are all the changes that I have. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, if you have any questions, wave your hand really obvious so I can see it, okay? Spencer,
So at this point, I think, Jeff, it'd probably be best to see if there's any public comment, and then we can close the public hearing and then turn it over to the planning commission for consideration.
okay, good point. All right. Are there any members of the public wishing to comment?
There's no members of the public in the room, and we didn't have anybody that pre-registered either. So at this point, I think it's safe
And there's
to-
nobody online?
Correct.
Okay. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing on the transportation improvement plan, reopen the regular meeting, and I'm going to open the meeting to questions for Martin on the improvement plan. So Spencer, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, the numbering scheme denotes the first 2 numbers denote the year that it was applied for. Is that correct? The grants on that?
No, the first 2 numbers are the year that we put it on the tip.
Okay, so I see that they're all planned here. Have any of them besides the one that says pending been funded?
No, the only one that's been funded was the Willamette Campus Glen.
Gotcha.
That was a PE only grant. What happens with these grants, especially on the federal side, once the phase gets obligated, it gets taken off the list. Similar to Rainier Road, it was fully funded. We love TIB money. It's the best money out there. And then you could just take the whole project, that fund the whole project. Federally, they usually just fund a phase.
Thank you.
I actually have a question, so we've got the 2 new roundabouts proposed on Britain Parkway. And you mentioned that, putting them on this list will mean that the tribe, with their project, they'll help fund those roundabouts. Typically, when we do that through collection of mitigation fees for permits. For the tribe's projects, it's not something that we would be issuing permits for. So how would that work in this case? So it's somewhat unique in that, we have.
From our discussions, they're willing to do intermediate to traffic impact analysis for every phase that they go through. And that we're gonna have a developers agreement.
Okay.
With the city so that they do pay the traffic mitigation.
And that agreement will specify at what point in the process, they're required to pay their proportionate share for that.
That's what we're thinking right now.
Okay, that makes total sense. I just had this like, like, oh, well, this isn't just a typical project, cause it's not something
It's
that we would be issuing permits for. So for those that are aware or not aware, the tribe is moving forward with the Queen's Village project. They put that, or they've applied to put that property into tribal trust. And in doing that, if and when the tribal trust application is approved, basically at that point, it's their own sovereign property. And we at that point lack land use and building permit controls on that property. And so typically for all the rest of these projects that are on traffic mitigation lists, we collect for every project a proportionate share, the impact of that associated with that project at the time of permit, like prior to issuing their building permits, they have to pay our traffic mitigation fees. For this, we don't issue permits, and so we would need another mechanism, like an agreement that says how that payment would be worked out and the timing of that.
And Martin, is that with an agreement with the tribe, or was that conditions from BIA for putting it into trust?
I think that was our thinking on it. We ran through several scenarios and that seemed to be the fairest way of doing it is what we determined.
Sure. Okay, anybody else?
I'm just curious if you, what's the impact of a reduction in federal funding for all these projects? Because it's gonna happen.
Honestly, I don't know yet.
You don't know yet.
Nothing's changed for anything that we've gotten so far. The one grant the raise grant that we submitted early this year, the administration reduced it from like 200 billion to 20 billion or something along that line. And they were nice enough to change the name of the grant to the build grant a week before it was due. I found out on Monday when it was due on Thursday.
Oh, good, yeah. All right, thank you.
All right, with that, thank you, Martin. Stellar as always.
So at this point, the next step would be to recommend the 6-year tip to the city council for approval.
So I would be looking for a motion in a second on that.
Motion.
Second.
Jennifer moved. Did we get a second?
Robert?
Yeah. right.
Robert, okay, thank you, Robert.
You're welcome.
And so any further discussion on the motion to move this for recommendation for approval to the city council? All those in favor?
All right,
Hi.
Opposed? Awesome. There we are. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we get to hear from the fabulous Scott Egger
Oh, you are.
about the MPD.
Yeah.
A lot of butter you're putting on.
Say, 2, 3, you pass those down.
Can you pass one to me?
Yeah. We'll slip one under the garage door for you.
One of these a couple weeks ago.
There you go.
And then, nope. Three,
Yeah, they're,
not here.
I have the, I'm gonna.
Thank you.
I have it already.
Came with these out and talked about the issues and why they want to do it. Sure. You can just do a full screen.
There it goes. It's gonna do it. Full screen where?
You can go down to the bottom right hand corner, just down a little bit, that little left just of the hair, left there. Oh, yep,
There?
yep.
Okay.
We'll get it, one more.
Still at 5.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Jeff, just so you know, you're on the upper right corner of the screen, just.
Thank you.
Hey, well, thanks for having me here. You're probably wondering, why is the Public Works Director giving a presentation on the Metropolitan Parks District? Well, because there are, the duties are split between Parks and Recreation and Public Works. There are 18 full-time employees in the Parks Department, Parks, Culture, Recreation, and about 22 in Public Works maintenance. So we maintain the parks and, you know, as you all know, Parks and Recreation does a phenomenal job of putting on a recreation program. So with that said, we just, there we go. Oh, business first. I'm not here to campaign. I'm not here to promote. I'm just here to provide
Explain.
information. Yeah,
Explain.
and yeah, it's just important for everyone to know that we can't use, you know, public facilities to campaign and so forth. So that's that little bit of information. Lacey Park Culture Recreation Vision to create exceptional events, experiences, and environments that delight, educate, and inspire human spirit, connecting people to each other and the past, and building a strong, healthy community. So you know, it's just, I think it's as much of an essential service to the city of Lacey as water and wastewater and all of those life-sustaining things. So hugely important for quality of life. And you know, a little bit about, you know, overview, as I mentioned before, there's 40 full-time staff that serve the parks, either on the recreation side or the parks maintenance side, with 18 in recreation, 22 in parks maintenance. There's 2 different boards that serve parks and recreation. There's the Parks, Culture and Recreation Board, but then also the Historical Commission. Operating budget, about $10.4 million. It's pretty much split 50-50, about 5 million on the recreation side, about 5 million on the maintenance side. So just a little bit about quantity. There's over 1,200, almost 1,270 acres of parks. And as you can see here, 518 of those are developed parks and 751 acres are undeveloped. And the majority of the undeveloped is the Cuyo Park and then the Palm Creek property purchase that occurred, Greg Cuyo, the Cuyo Park property was purchased when Greg Cuyo was still here. And then the Palm Creek, which added another 80 acres, was while Scott Spence was city manager. But yeah, it's just, we're very, very fortunate to have this much undeveloped park property set aside. So a little bit about funding. So as noted, Parks and Rec and maintenance of the parks is over 10 million. You can see from the big blue chunk of the pie there, 74% comes from the general fund. So that's about $7.8 million comes out of the general fund. And that is somewhat of a good reason why the Metropolitan Parks District is being pursued. And you can see 16% comes from programs and fees, 3% from investment earnings, and 2% from lodging tax, and a little bit more from sponsorships. I think this slide makes a statement on how incredible the Parks, Culture and Recreation Department is. I mean, over 1,000 classes offered, 352,000 hours of recreation created, over 90,000 participants in the classes and events. And you can see the list there, everything from aquatics to team programs, museum. I mean, it is, you know, I think a jewel in the state of Washington, not just the quality of the parks, but the, you know, the recreation and cultural events and historical as well. So it's an amazing jewel and a very critical part of the city of Lacey. So a little bit about Lacey Parks maintenance staff hours. You can see that there. See the long bar by far is janitorial and parks cleanup. It's important to note that a lot of maintenance work that we do, you know, you'll maybe do an element once a month or once a year. The reason why janitorial is 3 times greater than, say, turf maintenance is, you know, in our busy parks, for example, you know, you are cleaning restrooms multiple times a day. You know, you're restocking, you're emptying trash cans multiple times a day. So it's that repetitive nature that drives up those hours, as as great as they are, but very, very necessary. There's quite a process, which I'll explain later. But yes, the council made a decision to take the approval of a Metropolitan Parks District to the voters on August 5th. And to, create the MPD to provide ongoing funds for maintenance, operation, and improve, all the facilities, parks, trails, and so forth. The boundaries are the city limits, and as the city annexes and grows, those limits will grow, with those annexations. It'll be governed by the city council. And then the tax rate, which I'll explain a little more of the background there, is gonna be set at up to 45 cents per $1,000 of assessed property value. So in 2 slides, I'll give you those numbers. So what is an MPD? It's a junior taxing district, authorized by the state of Washington. And so what's the purpose? To create more parks, features, and also have the revenue sources to maintain those and keep up with maintenance in our existing parks as well. Why? Provides ongoing dedicated funding for new park features that may otherwise take longer to complete or may not occur at all. You'll see a trend with cities, and I'm gonna use kind of an analogy with the Transportation Benefit District, something that's near and dear to my heart. So when I started here over 18 years ago, Lacey was one of probably the only city in the state that was dedicating about $2 million a year to street overlays. I mean, that was unheard of, but Lacey had the financial wherewithal in the general fund to do that. As time went on, it was more and more competing needs came on board. It was evident that was no longer, and a general fund could not continue with that. It wasn't sustainable. So ultimately, after plenty of analysis, council approved moving forward, going to the voters for a dedicated funding source, which was a Transportation Benefit District. There's a parallel here and great similarities here. As time goes on, there's more and more competition for general funds. As you know, things like, paying for homeless, paying for or subsidizing affordable housing, all these things, they weren't even a discussion item or a budget item 10 years ago. Now they are, but the general fund isn't growing. So, there's a need here if we want to see parks, then the park system continue to grow and be maintained. So I mentioned cost earlier. So you can see here, $500,000 is pretty close to, the average value home in this area. You see in the paper quite frequently that information is published. So the cost to a property owner who has a home valued at $500,000 is going to be about $225 per year at an assessment of 45 cents per thousand increase in property tax. So, that's something obviously every voter is going to have to decide if that's affordable to them or not. I'll get into it a little bit later here where that number came from. So revenue and budget, they're predicting that the revenue generated from this, if the voters choose to approve a Metropolitan Parks District, and increasing their property tax by 4 to 5 cents per thousand, we generate around $6 million per year. And that's obviously based on 2024 values. So probably one of the items where there was considerable discussion here is this. It's a supplement, not replace existing parks and recreation funds. So,
Dean, can I call you back, please? I'm in a meeting.
hi, Dean.
Thank you.
So, yeah, that's critical. Obviously, securing voter trust is incredibly important. And we need to be completely transparent on how these funds will be spent. And so if there was any intent whatsoever to supplant existing general funds that are going to parks maintenance with these funds, that would need to be clearly communicated. And then also it would probably equate to a no vote because who's gonna support increasing their taxes to pay for something they're already paying for? So anyway, that's a very, very important point. So new parks features. So what are the priorities and how were they established? Well, the priorities were established by everybody who participated in surveys and provided feedback. And there's another slide coming up that will get into, you know, just how many surveys have been taken place in the last number of years. You know, the Metropolitan Parks District went to the voters in 2018 and did not pass. And since that time, I can tell you that incredible amount of work has occurred in terms of going out to the citizens and getting input and, you know, asking what their priorities were, forming committees to evaluate and analyze. So in terms of priorities, spray parks, water features, trails, open spaces, sports fields, you can see there on the list. Pickleball is hugely popular, as many of you probably know. You know, playgrounds, pump tracks, skate features. So those are all items that would be considered. And obviously near and dear to my heart is maintenance. You know, if we build it, we need to be able to maintain it. And anyone who's ever been a janitor or, you know, done any maintenance, we all want to take pride in the work that we do. And there's nothing more frustrating than an employee not having the tools, the training, the resources, the funding to maintain what they're supposed to take care of. You know, they look at it as they own it, their name's on it, and they want to take care of it, you know, in high quality delivery. And I want to see them have that as well. So community input, this is really important. This paints the picture that there's been over 8,700 comments that have been obtained in terms of what's the priority, what do the citizens like since 2021. So, you know, just going through the blocks here, Lacey Cares Community Survey, 6,000 open-ended responses in 2021, outreach teams, 800 more responses, Parks and Rec Survey, 1,200 more responses, 2022, additional outreach and survey requests, which resulted in another 700 responses. 2023, the Parks Task Force confirmed priorities of the 2023 Parks Culture and Rec Comp Plan. And then this past year, what the council did was they formed a Parks Improvement Funding Work Group. And that consisted of over, I think it was 15 citizens. And there were, I think, 9 voting members, 6 non-voting members. And it included an impressive group of citizens. And they were provided information by a number of groups. By the, you know, the finance director gave a presentation on, you know, that how parks are financed, where the money comes from, where it's going to. Jamie Oakland, our parks maintenance supervisor, gave a presentation, pretty detailed presentation on maintenance of parks. You know, they were tasked with going through a number of documents, a lot of information. There are a lot of meetings to somewhat come up with not just the priorities, which we'll go through some of these here, but also that 45 cent per thousand threshold. And so yeah, that final Parks Improvement Funding Work Group was critically important in bringing a recommendation to the council. So there is a slide for every one of these projects mentioned here, but since we have this summary slide, just quickly, Curio Park, Phase 1, Virgil Clarkson Senior Center expansion, Brooks Park, Long Lake Park, launchers as well, Rainier Vista, Meridian Park, you know, Future Young Child and Family Center, which is that effort is being led by Northwest Public School District, the RAC, and South Lacey. So,
Scott, can I just interrupt one,
Yeah.
one thing too? With that, Parks Funding Work Group, there was a representative from the Planning Commission on that group. That was Daphne Retzloff. So Daphne, for those who've been around on the Planning Commission, would provide updates on that process to the Planning Commission. So there was a Planning Commission member on that work group as well. I just want to mention that.
okay. Yeah, great point. So yeah, QU Park, obviously it's a jewel. We're very fortunate to be able to acquire it when we did. And, you know, mostly undeveloped, but right now there's a $6 million project going on to kind of start the ultimate, you know, the first phase 1A of the overall build out there. This first phase will have a playground area, we'll have a disc golf, and then it will also have some trails. And I mean, those trails are absolutely beautiful out there. So it's really nice having a rural type park, you know, just adjacent to the urban area. Oh, you might have got edited a little bit. So next slide, senior center, Virgil Clarkson Senior Center. So the big thing here is it's at capacity over capacity. So it's very, very popular. Lacey has a great partnership with Senior Services for South Sound, which is a nonprofit. You know, Lacey owns and maintains the facility, but we need to expand the facility and we need to expand parking as well. Brooks Park. So most people don't even know Brooks Park exists because it's hemmed in between 13th and 14th, and the only access is off of College Street where it's kind of hidden from view. So there's a desire to improve the park, you know, more draw, you know, install playground equipment and that type of thing. But yeah, that's probably the most underused park in the city of Lacey. Long Lake and Watchers Park. So Lacey acquired this property here in 2022. Master planning needs to occur to, you know, determine ultimately how this is going to be used. Tell you this house is not worth saving. It will be demolished. But I think any of you, you know, you're all aware, I'm sure, of how popular Long Lake Park is. It's the only developed park on the lake with swimming facilities. Obviously, Watchers is on Hicks Lake, but there's no swimming facilities associated with that. So great opportunity there. Rainier Vista Park, you know, we've built pickleball courts there a couple of years ago. The tennis courts can be outfitted for pickleball, but I think, you know, that pickleball is probably one of the fastest growing sports in the country right now. But then also, you know, considering Spray Park and outdoor table tennis, ping pong for Rainier Vista. Meridian Park, up off of campus area. So yeah, these items are the items that were and feedback we received from citizens. So pickleball courts, skate feature, pump tracks, sports fields, spray parks. Young Child and Family Center, North Thurston School District. So I can tell you North Thurston is moving ahead. There is a desire to install pool water features there, which Lacey is willing to partner on. And there's also been, I mean, North Thurston, the Y, and Lacey have all had conversations about partnering on that. Right now, there is no agreement, but the city, or excuse me, North Thurston is moving forward with elements of this. And if we can all come to agreement in the future.
Hey, Scott,
Yeah,
is this located where the old Pacific West facility was?
so this is on the north side of Nisqually Middle School.
Okay,
It's where Bucknell Fields was.
yeah, okay.
So South Lacey, as noted, spray parks was something that came up over and over in the surveys as a desirable feature to have. So there is, you know, the goal of distributing spray parks, you know, around the community. The rack, infield turf replacement, playground replacements. You know, currently there's one synthetic turf soccer field The infields for the softball fields and baseball field are synthetic turf. Those synthetic turf fields last 10 to 15 years. A couple have been replaced more recently, but we need to move forward with additional replacements. Playground equipment also is getting dated and older and needs to be replaced. And keep in mind, one thing about the RAC, it is partially funded through the Public Facilities District, but there is a large contribution from the general fund. It's not just a pay-to-play facility for the sports field, it's also a nice park. So it gets that dual use, which is great. So, you know, even though the council is looking at RAC Phase 3 and what can potentially be funded through, you know, an extension of the Public Facilities District, all that planning is separate from the Metropolitan Parks District. Holman Park, yeah, I mean, there's some of the, you know, asphalt work around trees, picnic area, you know, just renovations required. Lake Point, there again, you know, everything gets old and needs maintenance, so court facilities need to be resurfaced. Also with the trails through Wonderwood, which is, you know, really a nice jewel, but you know, as roots grow, you know, under the asphalt, all experience this, they create, you know, big hazards and makes for a bumpy bike ride. So we need to fix that. And then potential maintenance projects, Rainier Vista, Thornberry, Hummer Park, all need upgrades to playground equipment. And then in terms of previous Lacey Parks investments, 23 years ago, 2022, there was a $10 million bond, which helped fund, you know, many of the items listed here. I think the photo there of the kind of, yeah, I was at first I was thinking that was Rainier Vista, but not so sure now. What's that?
I don't think he's talking to us.
Somebody else. Anyway, the army helped with site grading back then,
Mhm.
but it's not as simple just asking JBLM, hey, do you need a training exercise? There is a lot more to it
Mhm.
than that. So, you know, I've heard people mention, hey, why don't we just call up JBLM and have them come down and do some of this work for us? And it's not quite that simple. And at the time, there was a retired lieutenant colonel that worked here at Lacey that had a lot of influence on that back then as well. So funding options. So there again, I don't know if you all have seen the Parks Improvement Funding Work Group recommendations. If you're interested, you know, you can let Ryan know and we can get you a copy of that. But it provides background on how they arrived at the last block, or the MPD being the desired option. But just left to right, current funding, city general fund competes with other city services. As you all know, those competing needs are growing. Projects may take longer to complete if they're completed at all. Just limited ability to expand maintenance programs. I can tell you that we have, in our budget application process or budget proposals process for the last 5 years, we've requested an additional journey level maintenance for parks maintenance, and that's been turned down due to lack of funding. I mean, you know, the city manager has an incredibly tough job because they take, you know, budget proposals from all the departments. They have to weigh out the competing needs. So that I think helps provide a snapshot of the financial situation right now. Bond, one-time funding with a defined total dollar amount or specific acquisition and development projects, no maintenance or operations funding. So bonding, you know, when you go to the open market to sell bonds, you can't just say, I think we're gonna, you know, pay repay the bond with general fund dollars. There needs to be a dedicated source of funding.
Yeah, right.
And for example, the police station, you know, we're bonding a portion of that, the cost of that. The dedicated source there is real estate excise tax. And now that's been shifted. 100% real estate excise tax used to go into the transportation, church, the arterial street fund. And so now it's gonna go into its own fund. REIT is very specific to what it can be spent on. It's not considered general fund money. But, you know, the point being that there is a dedicated source of funding for that bonding. And so I don't know that this is even an option because there's not, you know, a dedicated source of funding if we went out to bond for this purpose. So that brings up the Metropolitan Parks District. It is ongoing funding. There is no end date. And there again, just to compare with the Transportation Benefit District, that was a 0.2% sales tax increase with a 10-year sunset. And we're gonna be going back out for that because it was approved in 2017, which means the 10-year sunset in 2027. This is for property tax increase, so it's fantastic that, you know, it's, that there is no end date. And it can fund capital improvement, acquisition, maintenance, and operations. It can fund all aspects of parks. So, yeah, if you're, would like more information on Metropolitan Parks District, this is the RCW that describes it. So, with that said, I hope I
right.
do a sales job.
You did.
You did a very, very good job, Scott. If you could return me back to full screen so I can see everybody. Scott, you did an amazing job. One thing I want to remind everybody as you're asking your questions and making comments, you can certainly make comments that are positive towards parks in general. You can make comments that are negative in parks towards general. You cannot advocate for this particular ballot measure. So with that, are there any questions for Scott? Spencer.
Yes. So I was reading through the actual proposition that was sent into the auditor's office, and the RCW says that the district can go up to 75 cents per $1,000. And this one is going for 45 cents. I didn't see in that proposition. The impression I got was that the Parks Board, Improvement Board limited it at that. Is that a guaranteed hard limit because that's what they only requested, or could it be changed without a vote of the public in the future to the 75
To
cents?
go above 45 cents would require another vote.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, when you do these things, when you're making these decisions, obviously one consideration is kind of pain threshold of the voters. And yeah, I mean, trying to determine where that is can be challenging, but yeah, it's so. Yeah, in order for it to be increased above 45 cents per thousand, would require voter approval.
Perfect. Another question, no one else.
Let's give everybody else a chance first. Does anybody else have anything? All right, Spencer.
Okay, nope. Do you wanna go, Robert?
Oh, wait, Robert.
Okay, it's okay. I can wait my turn.
So we have a Parks and Recreation Board, we have the Improvement Board, but we've chosen to make the council the board members, directors of this. What was the logic behind that? It feels like some criticism I've heard from the community about this is that they're concerned that the supplanting of funds is going to happen. And that if we had an independent Parks Board overseeing that in some capacity, it would provide an extra layer of comfort for the people that have.
So all of the boards are advisory to council. And, you know, I believe the RCW describes who can govern, and it has to be the city council.
There's actually two different options. One is an independently elected Metropolitan Parks District, or if the boundaries follow exactly the city limits, the city council can act in place of an independently elected Metropolitan Parks District. So for example, if we had an area that included outside, then in theory could be made up of different. There could be county commissioners on it, there could be independently elected citizens on it, those kinds of things. So there's kind of two different ways to be able to slice that. And the simplest one for the purpose of the Metropolitan Parks District that only applies to the city is for the city council to oversee that. Because the city council also oversees the budget for the entire city, right? So it doesn't make a lot of sense to have somebody that's elected, another body that doesn't oversee the city's budget, making city budget decisions other than the city council.
No, I understand. It's just something I've heard from a lot of predominantly older citizens who are concerned that that money is gonna be snatched out and used for other things, and we're just gonna have less funding for our parks than the 10.5 that we're already spending.
The resolution, the ballot resolution, where the council authorized this going to ballot specifically says that it will not be supplanted. You bring up an excellent point, because there's nothing more important to us than credibility of the voters. I can tell you with the Transportation Benefit District, we wrote that very specifically that it would not be used for capital, because we needed to use those monies for maintenance in order to try to preserve the pavement condition index, as much as possible. But I can tell you that there's been probably no less than 4 times that I've pulled out the ballot in that resolution and repeated that to some city council members who suggested that we use those funds to build new sidewalks where none existed. Say, look, here's what the voters voted on. If you choose to do that, that's bait and switch. That destroys the citizens' credibility. So that's, I think, having a clear ballot measure, having those resolutions is what ensures that there's not a bait and switch.
Thank you. Appreciate the
The other,
thoroughness.
Spencer, I was on council at the time we did the Transportation Benefit District. And there was consideration of possibly setting up a separate elected board at the time. And the council felt like, we were asking the citizens to provide us money above and beyond what they were providing before. And to have staff that supports that newly elected board and also additional city resources would reduce the amount that was available for doing what we said we were going to do. And I was not in on the MPD discussions, but I'm assuming that the discussion was probably fairly similar.
Robert, did you?
One of my two questions was just how do we articulate, or what was articulated in the resolution? And thank you for clarifying that, because again, I think that would be my concern, is just overall, like, not having a reduction in funding because we now have this other funding source. And then just everything seems very articulate and pointed, except for South Lacey. That's just a general area, like we haven't decided which park. Okay, I was just making sure, because everything else is very like specific, and then I'm like, there is no South Lacey Park. That's right, that's just kind of a spattering of a few of the parks down in that general area.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I mean, Del Bush, Rainier Vista,
Yeah.
I mean, those were all
Just-
mentioned there, but
Wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something.
yeah. And I live in South Lacey, so I'll do my.
All right, Kirian, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. But my kids are 16 and 13 now and we use the park, so this expansion that's proposed, it seems like you've hit the things that as a mom, we were kind of looking at when, having something indoors in the winter has always been a challenge to get the kids out of the house and away from electronics. So I appreciate the thought and consideration that went into each of these projects for being things that the community might, really want. But I was curious about the 45 cents. Again, it says a maximum of, so once these projects are completed, does that mean that could be reduced, or would the potentially 45 cents continue on to promote future parks and maintenance?
You know, you can always reduce an amount without going to voters, but I can tell you there's a significant need for maintenance, operation and maintenance costs. So, yeah, sorry about that. Hi, Ryan. Oh. Oh, yeah, my youngest son. Anyway, yeah, it can always be reduced, but I think with the goal of.
If I can weigh in, so what happens is that the Metropolitan Parks District sets a budget every year that is X amount. And that budget has to be underneath the 45 cents per 1,000 assessed value. So essentially, like, there will be fluctuations in that assessment that you'll be paying because the budget may go up if there's bigger projects. Budget may go down if there's less big projects, and so that'll be somewhat fluid. It will also be dependent on any annexations we do. So if we do annexations, that'll increase the amount of assessed value, which will spread the peanut butter on the toast a little bit thinner. So, you know, and it'll spread it out to more users or more people that are paying into the district. That will be something we'll have to communicate as we do future annexations, is that will be an additional cost to those new residents. So there's a lot to, you know, those generally though, like, you know, you will only top out at the 45 cents per 1,000, but that amount will fluctuate over time.
Plus, remember that levy rates on your property taxes float with assessed values. So if you get a pretty significant increase in assessed values, that levy rate for the MPD is going to go down.
Robert has a question.
Just have one more
Yes.
question. If there are, if there's an instance or a year where there is the actual budget does not meet the proposed budget and there's some sort of surplus, is that earmarked for this district itself? It doesn't get like lumped into the city of Lacey's general fund, like kind of rainy day fund, right? It would live separately.
Correct.
Okay.
This is different than a Metropolitan Parks District in terms of how the bookkeeping occurs, or bookkeeping requirements.
Okay. Thank you.
I just have a comment. I'm not actively advocating for this, but I will say that approximately $20 a month for property owners to have access to highly maintained, safe, clean parks with upgraded, up-to-date features sounds pretty good. So thanks for the presentation.
Okay, that was borderline, Jennifer. Okay.
Not advocating
Card.
for it. Thanks for the information.
All right. Thank you, Scott.
Well, hey, thank you for, you know, having me, but I really need to, all the hard work was, well, there was a big team, but obviously, you know, Jen Burbage and, you know, Jenny Wilson have done all the heavy lifting on this, and they have about probably 25 of these to, you know, presentation. So I'm just helping out a little bit. But thank you.
Well, you did a great job, Scott. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next up.
Who wants to be Martin next?
Now we got Shannon next.
Yep, that's it. Can I go now?
Absolutely,
Now?
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, look, we got Sarah too. This is awesome.
Me too. Just to introduce everybody to Shannon. But first of all, I'm Sarah Shelley and I'm the current planning and economic development manager. For those of you who don't know me, tonight Shannon Vincent is gonna present to you some work that she's started working on or started to put together for some consolidation of development permit procedures
For those of you that were here last year, you'll remember that when we brought chapter 1 of the development guidelines to you that talk, in response to some state legislation regarding timelines for permits. And at that time, I had said, we're gonna be back to talk about moving chapter 1 out of the development guidelines and codifying them, as well as doing some other work with our development procedures to get them into the Lacey Municipal Code where they're more easily accessible and they make a little bit more sense. So Shannon Vincent is new to the city of Lacey. She joined us in April of this year. So she's almost at 3 months with us and joined us from the county. She's our new special projects planner, and she's gonna be presenting, giving you an initial briefing tonight and then end up with some next steps for when you'll see her again related to this project. So Shannon, go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. And thanks you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here to meet you all and to share the beginnings of this project with you, hear any of your initial feedback, and then go into next steps. So like Sarah said, and sorry if my beginning is a little bit repetitive. Like Sarah said, this is the development procedures update to consolidate our sections of code, both in the development guidelines and Title 16 of the LMC, and create a new title. So with that, a little bit of background, most of our regulations regarding processes and procedures for land use applications are currently in chapter 1 of the Development Guidelines and Public Works Standards Manual and in Title 16 of the LMC. The intent of this overall update is to consolidate all the development procedures under one title. This is kind of to improve the efficiency of viewing the code and navigating it, as well as helping to streamline development regulation implementation when we're actually using these procedures. So overall, in terms of content, the title will detail any regulations relating to submittal, review, approval or denial of an application, and then the appeal process for that decision. It'll also include noticing procedures and timelines. So the codes will establish both staff and applicant roles and responsibilities in the review process and clarify the standards and requirements that applicants have to meet in order for a project to actually be approved. So with consolidating these chapters into a new title, we also have an opportunity to kind of address additional procedural process improvements. So although this is primarily a restructuring of our existing code and our existing standards, we're also going to be introducing a few updates to our language and our procedures. So this is intended to create more efficiency and efficacy with our procedures, to fill gaps and some inconsistencies that were previously identified by staff who use this code every day. To ensure that the wording that we're using within the title and with other titles is consistent and concise, and then just to reduce any inconsistencies or redundancy. So some of those proposed revisions include this list and then the list that was included in some of the materials that you guys received last week. I do want to note that this isn't exhaustive. At this point, we're in the early stages of developing this update. So this is some ideas that we have. Nothing is finalized at this point, but some things I wanted to flag are that we are proposing establishing express review criteria for all land use applications or revising criteria where there may be unclear right now. Creating time limits for resubmittal and approval to help move projects along that maybe have too long of lifetimes than is reasonable. And then amending our procedures for code interpretations, amendments, and rezones. So in terms of next steps, after this initial briefing, we are going to be doing internal department review and revisions with our staff and other departments. And then returning here hopefully in August for a second workshop where you guys will have the opportunity to actually look at our updates that are more finalized and thorough and be able to review them in detail. Then moving into a public hearing in September and ideally moving towards adoption by the end of the year. But we shall see. I know this was really introductory and I'm super happy to go over any questions that you guys might have about the material that you received at this point. But I'm totally open to questions and we'll do our best to respond to any of your initial thoughts.
Shane, you want to maybe stop sharing?
Okay, I can't, I need full screen, please.
Yep.
There we go. Okay, hands for questions.
One more.
Spencer, Man, you were on the spot tonight.
I know, I just don't need to sleep the night before and then I'll be ready to go. Running on adrenaline. So I noticed that it seems like we're moving away from the ABC to the more numbered. Is that to fall in line with the rest of the municipal code, I presume? Just for standardization across the board?
Yeah, especially I think with Title 16, that's how it's typically written. That being said, the way that this is actually going to be structured is still, not finalized, so it could change at this point.
So I've actually been here long enough to go full circle on this. So these materials, this stuff used to be in our code. And in the early 2000s, the decision was made to pull it out of the code and put a lot of this into the development guidelines. The idea being that the development guidelines was going to basically act as like a handbook for development. I think maybe Tom Stiles, when Tom's been here in the past, has explained that kind of concept. That is, it was gonna be kind of a, one-stop shop as far as development standards and procedures go. And I think as time has gone on, we've found as staff, it's better that these things be brought back into the municipal code, because that's where they should be. They're law, they're rules and regulations. They are not development guidelines. And so, they're not necessarily standards. They're not those kinds of things. So we're going back to kind of the way things used to be, where we have a separation that the development guidelines are now really becoming the public works standards. And then the code sections that we've been using in chapter 1 are now being pulled back into the overall Lacey Municipal Code. And it will make more sense from an administration standpoint, from, when staff is making a decision or the hearing examiner is making a decision or something like that, to have that as part of code and not as part of a separately adopted development guidelines document.
I was just curious about time limits and what brought you to those dates, as far as like what kind of data you were reviewing, if there was like a shelf life that you saw, like if projects hit X day, they never, their completion rate is less than 5% or something.
Yeah.
Basically, like, what's the data to kind of back up the great, there was a lot.
Yeah, enforcing them.
Yeah, anything related to Senate Bill 5290, which you
Okay.
guys reviewed last year, is untouched. All of those are still in place. With regard to the resubmittal timelines, that I think is probably what you're talking
Yeah.
about, the 90 days, that was actually taken from codes from nearby jurisdictions,
Okay.
maybe just so that we could be consistent. That is still something that we're gonna have an internal discussion about, if that makes sense for us.
Okay.
I think City of Tumwater uses 90 days for resubmittal, and then that resubmittal too can be extended ideally, if the applicant feels that they need more time.
And the idea behind it is just to make sure that we don't have existing vested projects that are out there forever.
Yeah.
And we have code changes, that would then, somebody comes back 2 years later with a project doesn't meet existing code but can move forward because their land use approval was vested 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, anybody else? Well, welcome, Shannon. I'm sure you've discovered you've walked into an amazing place to work.
I did.
Good. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
So before we go, I want to clarify something I said earlier. When I was talking about the MPD ballot measure and I said you cannot advocate for it or against it, I meant in this public session. You can obviously have your personal feelings and advocate however you wish. But while we're doing official City of Lacey business, we cannot have a position.
Thanks for the clarification.
You are very welcome.
Just walk out that door.
Well, technically, you need to be off the property.
Yeah, drive
Your car.
All right, with that, if nobody has anything else, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned, and we will see you all on July 23rd, and I promise to be there in person. Oh, Ryan,
Yeah,
are you done?
yeah, I was
Did
just
you have
waiting.
something?
No,
Okay.
I was just saying.
All right, I got
Enjoy your
grandkids.
beer.
Yeah, his name's doubled now. It's like Jeffrey again. He's like, I just gotta put my name.
That was Zoom. It was beyond my control.
minds reading. Good job.
Thanks.
Yeah, I saw 3 things on the back and I was like, oh, it's gonna be in full 2 hours.
Yep.
Just kidding.
I think it's presumed.